Hello and welcome to Agents of Nonprofit. My name is Alexander Lapa, and I'm here to speak with everyday superheroes helping nonprofits. Joining me today is Brynne Krispin to talk about social media. Brynne, welcome to the show.
Hi, Alex. It's so great to be here with you. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. For those who are hearing you for the very first time, I was wondering if you could share your superhero origin story.
Absolutely. Well, let's see. I started in social media from the very beginning, right out of college. I studied journalism and English. I was actually pretty anti social media in the beginning. I really wanted to work for a newspaper and do the print journalism thing. But during my senior year of college, I interned with a really amazing nonprofit in London that was focused on helping Syrian refugees resettle in London. And so they hired me to do writing, interviews, just to tell their stories. So I was getting some really amazing content from that. But this was not to date myself, but this was 2011. So it was still very new for social media to be a part of nonprofits and companies too, just trying to figure out where this fits into marketing and storytelling. So I took it on myself to just experiment and see what would happen if we started sharing these stories online, on Twitter, on Facebook. And the moment we did, they just took off and started seeing some really amazing conversations and dialogue and donations coming in just from simply telling these stories on social. So that was the moment for me where I started pivoting and thinking, okay, there's definitely something here. And it's really cool to see that real time feedback and conversation. It's not just printing something and sending it out in a newspaper and dropping it on someone's door. You're actually inviting conversation and starting this community online and getting some real traction with advocacy and donations, and just seeing that action take place from a story was really, really cool to experience. So from there, I pivoted from the print journalism route and started going full in on social. Got my first gig as a social media manager in DC, working for a public policy organization. And then from there, went to an anti-human trafficking organization called International Justice Mission and led social media there for a couple years before I switched to freelance and then starting Cause Focus back in 2022.
Cool. So that's there's a lot. We're gonna definitely unpack some of what you just said. But I'm just curious to bring people up to speed today. So what is how do you spend your days these days in social media?
Well, as a business owner now, an agency owner, my days look pretty unique. There's no day that's exactly the same. I started Cause Focus after I saw just the need in nonprofits of trying to understand social media and how overwhelming it can be. I saw a lot of burnout happening, both myself when I was at a nonprofit, and then just working with a number of nonprofits as a freelancer, started noticing just how much of a burden it was adding to people's plates. And, oftentimes at a nonprofit, for many, they don't have a dedicated person doing this. So just started noticing those trends of, okay, where could I step in and help people figure out, okay, how to do this really well and how to not burn out. So a lot of my time right now is spent on building strategies, doing audits, working with clients to figure out a really high value strategy that they can deliver for their nonprofit to start seeing the results that they need to on social in order to build a community, build their network, get more donations at the end of the day, to really have it make an impact for the organization and not just post for the sake of posting or because their nephew told them that they should be on TikTok, but coming to it from a really strategic standpoint.
And that's a great segment to where I was hoping to go next. The idea that there was a moment in time when everyone said you need to have a website. Regardless what kind of business you are, if you are a business, you need to have a website. I want to ask the question of, do you need to have social media as a nonprofit? Because the obvious answer is yes, but I want to know why. And you kind of alluded to it in a couple of your earlier comments, but I wanted to really draw this out to make sure that yes, even today in 2025, there is a legitimate reason for nonprofits to be on social media, and here are those reasons, high level.
High level, yes. I would say if you are tasked at your nonprofit with needing more people bought into your mission and more awareness around what you do and more donations coming through the door, then yes, you need social media. It's absolutely critical now. It's not just a nice to have or something to have on the back burner. You need a really strong strategy around social, and you need to activate that community online. And social media can be such a powerful way to tap into people that you might not be reaching in other avenues like email or your website. Because it's such a community based platform, you can really build that warm relational type of connection with future supporters or donors in a way that just sometimes doesn't feel quite as organic when you're sending an email or doing a campaign, even just a paid social campaign. But if you're building an organic community, you're building this nice warm pool of people who will then be aware of what you do and more likely to take action when you need them to do it. So if that's you and you're in that place, then I would say, yes, social media is critical. If you're at a nonprofit where it feels like everyone knows exactly what you do and you don't need any more donations and revenue is great, then maybe you can focus your efforts on something else. But that is not the case with all the nonprofits I talk with. I haven't met one like that. So I would say if you're listening and that fits the bill for you, then it's definitely worth considering a social media strategy that activates that community for you this year.
That's a fun way of putting it because I haven't either met an organization that doesn't want more revenue and a larger community and a bigger impact. So
That's you. I would love to meet you though.
yeah, exactly.
I'd have a lot of questions for you and figure out how you made that happen.
I'm also curious to know for social media, is it a way of connecting with your existing community? If you are a subscriber of a newsletter, you join the nonprofits community and social media. You're basically nurturing a relationship versus what is the impacts of having a social media account to be able to create discovery for new people to learn about your organization? Do you find a good way to do it, or is it usually they learn about an organization some other way and then the social media just again nurtures that relationship?
That's a great question. Yeah, because a lot of times nonprofits will come to me saying, "Okay, we need the top of the funnel. We need just more people at that very top, and then that way we can help convert them as we move them down this funnel that we have in our minds." But the beauty of and the magic, I think, of social media is that you are able to use this platform and community to connect and have these touch points with supporters and donors and potential donors throughout the entire journey. So even if they come into you brand new at the top of the funnel, that's great. And you can build that connection and that relationship as they get to know you more and become a donor. But even after they give, social media can be a great place to remind them, okay, why did they give in the first place? How do they get more involved? How do they now start volunteering or maybe host an event? So it doesn't stop at just bringing them in at the top of the funnel. So I think that's where some nonprofits get social media wrong, is seeing it as just as a way to get more people through the door. But it's such a powerful tool to keep people there, keep them loyal, keep them interested and engaged in your cause so that they don't go away and give their donation somewhere else, but they keep coming back to you and become more and more a part of your mission and even take ownership of the mission. So that's what we call, when people get to that point, a loyal advocate. So if we're turning those passive audiences into loyal advocates, that's the goal, right? We want people to stick around. We want them to own the cause, to activate their own network and tell their friends and family about it. And social media is a great way to help keep them warm and engaged and help them through that process to know exactly what it looks like to do that for your organization.
Yeah, the funnel is a great way to picture this, right? At the top of the funnel is people who discover you, and then you start nurturing that process as they go down the funnel to the hope that they become a donor, maybe a major gift donor, and so forth. But at that top of that funnel, and maybe it's different for different orgs, and it probably is. Do you see normally social media being the top of that funnel, or is it? I know it's definitely towards the top, and then maybe in the middle a little bit. But like, what generally comes first? Is it an awareness, and then the social media? Like, for example, when people make a donation to a website or to a nonprofit, rather, they are often saying, subscribe to our newsletter, and that's one way to keep engagement and nurturing. I don't know if it's the same thing for, well, I guess they always say if you don't follow us on social media, but it's not as usually as like a one click, you know, uncheck or check to say to be subscribed to our newsletter. It's not the same thing for social media. You have to kind of follow additional steps to manually opt into that kind of stuff. So yes, nonprofits can say join us and talk to us and communicate with us and engage with us on social media, but it's not as easy as an opt-in process as newsletters. So there's kind of like a, I'm not sure it's a chicken or the egg situation, but like do you normally find that those newsletters and discoverability and social media work together, or usually there's a more clear, or it works better if there's a clear path for that funnel?
Mm, that's a great question. And it is hard to track with organic social because you can look at your dashboard and see the analytics of who's clicking, who's following. But so much of what happens with a social media user happens in those dark metrics of things that you can't track. So did they copy, the link to this post and send it in a Slack channel for someone to see at work? Or did they just send it through a text message? Now Instagram, you can track sends a lot better than you used to. So that's a great metric to keep an eye on to see if people are sharing it and resonating with the content. But yeah, it's definitely one of those platforms where you have to have that mindset of we track the metrics, but also aware of there's a lot happening behind the scenes that we can't track. But if we are being really clear about our message and we're engaging people, so the engagement metrics are really important here to see, are people resonating with the content? Are they commenting? Are they sending it? Those are huge because that warms up the audience more and more and keeps them loyal. So those are great touch points to be able to just track and understand better, but again, doesn't always tell the full story. So having that full awareness of where it plays a part of your journey, and also just recognizing like sometimes you just have to let go a little bit and experiment and see what happens and start building, maybe even building like some surveys or some questions in your newsletter to understand how your audience is interacting with you on social. That can be really helpful too if you don't feel like you have a good grasp on why are people following you and what keeps them interested in your content, because those are metrics that unfortunately the platforms just can't report on. So you aren't able to pull that every single month. But having that kind of warm, nurturing mindset with social, keeping it as like I always say, it's almost like you're waving to your audience every time you post and show up in the news feed. So it's like, hey, we're still here. We're doing this important work. And even if you do nothing with this content, you're waving, you're building that connection at some point. You're staying top of mind and you're showing up. And so that's a huge win if you're a nonprofit and you're able to keep showing up consistently and staying top of mind.
Would you agree that those are the real goals of social media is to building those connections and showing up? Because like newsletters tend to have a much more specific focus, right? It's maybe informational at the beginning, but there's usually a call to action to donate or participate or do something, volunteer in some capacity, versus social media is more, I was going to use the word fluid, organic,
Mm-hmm.
more open, I guess, is there's no, each post doesn't seem to have a particular purpose other than, the showing up and the building connection. Would you agree on that? Or do you think that there should be a theme of some kind, a motive that, each individual post might be very benign, but there is a path-ish that organizations should follow, beyond the individual posts?
Mm. I think it's always a good idea to have some sort of clear outcome that you want to see from social. So, yeah, it's great to have the awareness and just to recognize, I like your word fluid, how fluid it can be. But at the end of the day, if you're not seeing some sort of tangible outcomes from it, then that's where we get in that gray area of, is this even worth our time? Are we burning people out? Is it a burden on our team? What is this even doing? So asking those questions from the very beginning of, okay, what do we want people to do when they land on our Instagram page or when they see these types of posts? And it doesn't mean it's going to be that same exact outcome every single time, but at the end of the day, what do we want people to be doing? So a newsletter is a great example because so many people donate through email, right? That is one of the top ways that users prefer to donate. So if your goal is to get more donations at the end of the year and email is a great way to do that, how can you nurture your social audience and build this really warm, organic community on social first? So that way you can choose these key moments to invite them to subscribe to your email list. And that way you're slowly building this email list over time, but it's coming in from a warmer audience on social, people who are already aware of you. They're bought in, they understand what you do, versus just cold email where you're just sending mass emails to people who may not have even heard of you before, asking them to give $50 in December. So that's where social can really play well with your other more tangible marketing goals, is building that community. So I think having that community mindset as your number one, building a community can only help you keep adding more warm users into your network and into your list. That way, when you're ready to ask them to do something, whether it's donate or show up for an event, you have a warm pool of people there ready to do it.
I also get the feeling that the content and the tone of social media is different than a newsletter. Newsletter tends to be a bit more formal, more precise. Maybe it's gone through multiple edits. I've seen some posts by some organizations on social media that are very casual. And the one that's coming to mind as we're talking, I think it's Burger King, that they actually write provocative, that has nothing to do with their brand at all, but they're just responding to certain social events or events on social media in a way that makes you go, huh, that's an interesting, irrelevant to the brand, but they're showing up and they're causing you to think, and they are doing a pattern disrupt where they're not really agreeing with what's happening, but they're disagreeing in a more of a, not sarcastic, maybe a bit sarcastic way. Like, I'm curious to know if there's a particular way or voice that organizations, specifically nonprofits, should build in their social media that can be or should be different than their other forms of communication.
That's a great question. And that's when we ask all the time with our clients. Because one thing I started noticing, especially when I was working at the anti-human trafficking organization, is that in order to tell these stories and build that emotional connection with your audience, it had to be empathy first. So putting yourself in the shoes of your donor or your social media follower, whoever it may be, trying to put yourself in their shoes and understanding what's important to them, what actually motivates them, what inspires them, what keeps them up at night, and then delivering content to them that builds that emotional connection and resonates is huge. And that's what helps, make them feel like they can trust you and have a stronger relationship with you. Same with any relationship, right, in real life. So if you are building content with that in mind, then it is going to look a little different than email that feels a little more structured and has more of a cadence and a rhythm to it. Whereas social, it can be more of that conversational tone. It can use a little humor. It can use a little sarcasm, maybe. And I actually saw a report recently that said 72% of Gen Z users on social want to see humor in the content. That's what resonates with them the most. So we're trying to figure out right now, okay, how do we help our nonprofit clients tap into a little bit of humor? And that's something brand new for them. And so thinking through, just again, experimenting. Social is, you have to be experimenting, testing the boundaries, being okay with some risk here and there, in order to break through and connect with your audience on that more relational level. And I mean, it's in the name, social media. It's a social environment. So if you think about walking into a restaurant or going to a happy hour, think about it as you're walking into a group of people that you need to be social with in order to connect with them. So that's where social media, you have to take a different approach from other marketing channels, because it has to be that community first, relationship first mindset in order to really stand out and be able to connect with your audience.
It's a very interesting metric to introduce humor these days, but I can imagine that might not sit well with certain, very serious type organizations like anti-trafficking, human trafficking type of organizations. And maybe there's a way of doing it. I can't think of anything offhand, but
I
the
saw an
idea of it,
example recently if you want me to share it.
if you can share it, that'd be great. Just to give us, because I'd love to, yeah, if you can.
Yeah. So I was doing a little research, like, okay, even with these nonprofits that work in really tough spaces, what does this look like? And I found one recently. It's called Avenues Recovery Center. They're based in New Jersey, I believe, but they have recovery centers all over the East Coast. It's an addiction recovery center. And they are doing these videos of their staff saying, if you've seen the trend of like I work in recovery, of course, and it's kind of these like sarcastic, blunt, direct uh, things that they have to deal with. But they do it in a way that's kind of like just honest, upfront. Like I work in recovery. Of course, I use my colleague's office as a way to vent and have a free therapy session. And it just goes through this series of things that they have to deal with as a staff. And so it's getting some good engagement because it's like, okay, here's just a real behind the scenes, honest look at what it looks like to be in this space. So again, experiment, and it may not always land well. So it's good to test it out. But that was one example I saw recently that I thought they did it really well.
I guess the adage is because all good humor has an essence of truth to it. So I think that's what they're leaning into is the true honesty of. I mean, there are moments that are when you look back at things, you can laugh to a certain extent. Sometimes in the moment you can't. But the idea of saying this is a genuine situation and let's take humor in it. You're right. It could be a fantastic way. I didn't. That's a really good. Thank you for sharing that example.
Yeah,
Um,
that truth piece is, I think, what Gen Z is really looking for. They're kind of tired of just the BS on social and just the fake influencers and feeling like they're being sold to. So if you can use humor as a way to just like be completely honest and transparent with them, they're really appreciating that.
Hey, Alex here. I want to take a brief moment and thank you for listening. If you've enjoyed this episode so far, please consider sharing it with someone who would also benefit from its insights. It's these kinds of referrals that really help the show grow. You can also show your support by making a small donation. I don't do corporate sponsorships or product placements, so I rely on your support to keep the show going. You can visit my website, agentsofnonprofit.com, and click Support Us in the top menu. Thank you kindly. Going back with the experimentation side, though, because there's definitely going to be some wins and some misses. So, any ideas or any feedback, suggestions that you can give to organizations to say, don't worry about pushing a bit past your comfort zone. And if you do get negative feedback, take it in stride, take it as a learning lesson, not as an attack. Like, is that something you would have to say, or is it another way of just prepping organizations to say, because you are going to be pushing that comfort zone, don't worry about, some of that negative feedback you might get?
Mm. Yeah, you're likely going to see some more controversial comments and things anytime you're experimenting and pushing the boundaries. So I would say definitely get on the same page with your director of comms. If you have a PR person at your organization, I know legal has to, have a say in this sometimes. So don't completely bypass your team here. Be smart about it. But maybe it's just a matter of you have a Slack channel that just tosses out any ideas, no dumb ideas here, but here's some great things to consider for the week. And you take the top three to your director of comms or CMO, whoever it may be. And then maybe you test it out just internally in the office, like how would this actually land? And maybe bring in somebody who talks to donors regularly so they could have that empathetic, mindset of, okay, I've met with these people, I kind of understand how they would perceive this type of content, and be having those conversations regularly. So that way you're not completely blindsided or come across as insensitive when you experiment with some of this content that pushes the boundaries. So there is a way to do it that still adheres to your brand and legal guidelines and all of that. Just put those measures in place so you can kind of skirt off any sort of major repercussions.
Because we're talking about a community, like you said, there's going to be a lot of, or hopefully a lot of responses to some of the social media content. What are your recommendations for responding to that, to keep that conversation going with the people who do respond? Is it something that you should, like, if an organization were to post something, today, let's say at 1 p.m., and then start getting answers or responses, is it something that you believe that someone should be actively monitoring and responding in real time, or batching it like 2, 3 times through the day or once a week? Like, is there any particular cadence to responding to the feedback you're getting from your social media posts?
That's a great question. I think, it's always the ideal to respond as timely as you can with social because these conversations are happening in real time and you want to be responsive to that. But speaking from former social media manager here who had a lot on my plate, multiple accounts, multiple, responsibilities, not just creating content, but doing the engagement, doing the analytics. So I get that it can be a lot and an unrealistic expectation to be doing that every single day. So I recommend, and what I started doing and what I recommend for our clients is just blocking off 2 or 3 days a week where you at least are doing 30 minutes or an hour, just checking those inboxes, checking your notifications, and flagging anything that might need to be, sent to leadership or going through HR or something, just to have eyes on it. And then if you're someone who manages a social media manager, being aware of how much time that takes and how taxing it can be on that person to be sifting through these comments, especially if there are a lot of negative comments. Seeing a lot of that negativity every single week can definitely take a toll on your mental health. So just being aware of that and putting in some boundaries and parameters to help that person manage that really well, and having that open conversation can be huge and help, make sure you're realistically responding on time and you're managing your community well, but it's not at the expense of your social media manager's mental health.
So it sounds like this is a full-time occupation, right? Social media manager sounds like an exclusive role that you're doing that and only that, or at least mostly that. Would you say that's the case, or should be the case for most organizations? Is there a moment when you're too small that you should outsource this, or too big that you should outsource this? Like, is there any particular criteria for having someone that's dedicated versus someone who is either in a part of a team or outsourced?
I think it really, and this is what I help in the audit when I do with clients, is figuring out, okay, based on your goals and what you need to accomplish on social, what does it realistically look like to get this out, this amount of content and the type of content we need, right? Because videos take longer than just copy, and design takes longer. So just being realistic, I think, from the very beginning of what do we need to do every week, and then can we actually execute this? And then if you need help with it, yeah, don't be afraid to outsource and find people who are experts who have been doing this for years and years, who have kind of cracked the code on how to do this well and do it efficiently. So that way you're not wasting time spinning your wheels and burning out and, endless trial and error until you get to this point where you feel like you've got it. You could save yourself months or years of headaches just by asking an expert for some help. So don't be afraid to do that. But I would say even the orgs that I work with that have $100 million a year budget, still I would say it's rare to see them have a dedicated social media manager. So often this social media person is doing not just social media, but they're also, doing some video and content creation and the community management. So I would say if you're listening and you're a nonprofit and you don't have this person, you're not alone. That is pretty common. But then I would say get that person some help. So whether it's outsourcing, or even if you can just pull in a couple other people on the team to help manage the comments, or hire a creative studio, someone just to help lift off some of that burden. So it's not all falling to one person, can one, just be great for that person to really thrive and succeed. But it also is going to guarantee that your content, when it's developed and it goes out, is the highest quality that it can be.
Today, and again, 2025, there's quite a few social media platforms out there: Twitter or X, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. Although TikTok's future is kind of iffy these days. Any particular or even I should mention LinkedIn. I mean, YouTube might be one of them as well. Any particular strategies for choosing which? Because I can't imagine all organizations being able to post on all of them. So, are there any strategies for choosing the right one that can resonate most with your audience or community? Ones you should avoid? Any considerations for which platform the organizations should use or shouldn't use?
Yeah, I would say begin with the end in mind. So that's one thing that my design professor told me again and again in college and burned it into my brain. So it's something I always recommend nonprofits have in the back of the back of their mind, is begin with the end in mind. So think about your goals. Think about the purpose of what you're trying to communicate. Think about the people that you need to reach, and then only after you have those two things clearly defined can you determine what platform to be on. So that's purpose first, people, and then platform. So those going through that process, just the exercise of figuring out the purpose of your content and then the people it needs to reach will help give you the answer for platform. For us, since we work exclusively with social impact leaders, we have seen LinkedIn hands down be the go-to platform for activating networks, getting executive thought leadership out on the platform in order to activate new corporate donors, new corporate partners. It's been a huge win across the board to be able to activate a CEO's LinkedIn account. And then we're also seeing just on LinkedIn 3 to 4 times engagement compared to other social media platforms right now. And then I would say Instagram is a close second. So we're still seeing a lot of good traction from Instagram. You just have to have a very unique strategy with Instagram, a lot of video, a lot of carousels, a lot of that creative content coming out. So if you are again starting with your purpose and your people, depending on who you're trying to reach and what the point is of the message that you're trying to send them, just figuring that out first before you go all in on a platform.
Is there like a mapping though? Because LinkedIn, for example, I know very well. I post there quite often, and it's obviously considered to be a professional network, at least more professional. But is there a mapping between, if your purpose is this, your person is this, therefore here are the order that you should consider using social media, versus if your person is that and your purpose is that, then this is your order. Like, is there, because the people who are looking at Instagram are obviously not the same, or not necessarily the same people looking at LinkedIn and all these other combinations. So, any particular strategy, or do you have this kind of mapping already in mind to be able to figure out which ones would probably work best, which platforms would probably work best?
Definitely. Yep. So with our social impact executives, we they come to us because what they've been doing before has not worked. If they're trying to meet new corporate partners and get new dollars from corporations, they've tried cold email, they've tried calling, they've tried just setting up one-on-one meetings and hitting a wall. So that's where we started going to LinkedIn, because we saw that it's a professionals platform. The people are real. They're responding to their direct messages. They're seeing content and engaging with that content and able to understand what the organization does from a unique perspective. So that's where that thought leadership piece really comes into play. So if we're activating a CEO's personal account, she's sharing her own unique perspective about the work, why she got involved in it. That creates that personal connection with her network, and then creates, again, this domino effect of seeing corporations kind of come in to the organization from her account, from her own content. So if your goal is to reach that type of audience, LinkedIn is doing really well right now. We have some clients who just have a goal of they want a younger, that more Gen Z audience. They want more video views. They want just more awareness for advocacy. They do advocacy events all throughout the year, and they're just trying to grow and make sure their organization is sustainable and their donor base is getting younger and not older. And so that's where we come in with Instagram, because that can be a great place to build an awareness and a new community, introduce your org to a younger audience who may not be familiar with you yet. So those are two examples just based on the LinkedIn and Instagram recommendations.
And I'm pretty certain that each of these platforms have a different way of being able to express yourself. Like Instagram being more reels and more short form video. LinkedIn's more text. There might be, like, if you're trying to produce a particular type of content or create a certain type of engagement, I imagine that based on the platform, you have to kind of change. Like, you have to change your message based on the platform, right? You can't have just one piece of content that you mass convey on all these platforms, because some work better with others. Any particular strategy for that? Like, is it more of a spray and pray type of thing situation, or would you say no? Definitely, if you're on Twitter, then you want to use obviously text, maybe a couple of links. If you're on Instagram, you definitely want to go videos. If you want to go LinkedIn, you definitely want to do maybe text with an image just to catch your eye. Like, is there any, what are the strategies for each platform, high level?
I would say diversification is key for no matter what platform you're on. So the algorithms like to see that you're switching it up and experimenting and trying new things. So if you're only posting videos every single day, you're not going to be reaching a new audience, essentially, because you're only reaching people who like videos. They want to see you trying images. They want to see you trying carousels. Anytime they have a new tool like a newsletter or the stickers on Instagram, they want to see you experimenting and trying that. So I would say no matter what platform you're on, try to mix things up and experiment and track over time what's working really well and what is your audience really enjoying right now. But I would say across the board, so both for LinkedIn and Instagram, since we were talking about those two earlier, the photos, original photos. So even if it's just you at the airport or, you're at a conference or just something you took from your phone. So nothing like super high res or stock imagery. Those are doing really well. And then videos are doing well, even on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is pushing video more and more. You might have seen. So definitely on Instagram, but even more now on LinkedIn. And then carousels. So we have a couple of clients where carousels are their number one content type every single month. So we're just leaning into that even more. And carousels can be a great way, especially for thought leadership, to just break down a concept or a new idea in a way that's very easy to understand, or just educate and inform your audience about your cause and what you do. And so it's a more interactive way to just get your ideas and your thoughts out there, that is a little bit more interactive and dynamic than just a text only type of post.
So it sounds like there's a lot of experimentation as well. What works, what doesn't work. And then even when you get it right, you still want to kind of mix it up a bit, like you said, to be able to reach new audiences. So that's definitely a challenge, but it's doable. I mean, and the benefits obviously are worth it. I'm curious to know if you had the choice of 1 million followers on any social platform or 100,000 email subscribers. I'm doing that on purpose to give a 10 to 1 because if you have 1 million email, I mean that's a clear choice. But like with a 10 to 1, what would you say is better for the organization and
Oh,
why?
Alex, why would you ask me this? So, if the organization's number one goal is just to get more donations, I would go with email subscribers. But I would say if the organization has a problem of awareness and just generally people understanding who they are and what they do, having that community on a platform gives you a lot of options. So you can convert that community to email subscribers. You can build relationships. You can identify certain lists within your community and then talk to those people through DMs or through comments and build relationships with them in a way that you couldn't do through email. So it's a tough question for me because I see so many opportunities with the community. Because at the end of the day, if you have a community, you're going to have a lot more options to convert them in a variety of different ways. Whereas with email, it's going to be more just direct and you're going to have an email relationship with them, which is a good thing if you're wanting to ask for donations, but can limit your opportunities down the road.
AI. I love talking about AI these days, especially. I mean, AI can build videos with audio and everything. Can share ideas or build not share ideas, but come up with ideas. So in your work and how you recommend working with social media is what role does AI have today, if any?
Well, we use AI every single day. We're transparent with our clients with how we're using it. For us, it's been a great way to almost build like research interns for our clients to help really wrap our minds around their deeper concepts and ways of thinking in a way that we as content creators are a little limited because we don't have PhDs. We haven't written 5 books and done TED Talks like they have. So it's really helped close the gap. So I would say that's the biggest opportunity and probably advantage of AI right now if you are a nonprofit leader and you're trying to create content among, 5,000 other things in your week, really tapping into AI as like a brainstorming tool, helping you just get your ideas out somewhere and then getting that assistance of, okay, now what do I do with this? And using AI to kind of segment and understand, okay, I have this newsletter I wrote, like, what can I do with it? I don't want it to just sit there and collect dust, but how do I easily get those concepts and ideas out into posts or put on a landing page? So it can be a great resource, I would say, for brainstorming and just helping you fill in the gaps where maybe you weren't able to do that before as a busy nonprofit leader. So definitely some opportunities there. I think there's also some things to be cautious of just with good in you only get good out if you put good in, right? So the data that it's collecting, the type of research it's producing is dependent on everything that's going into it right now. So if you are a nonprofit who is being innovative and trying to solve a problem in the world, I would just be cautious of the type of content that's coming out of AI right now. It might be outdated. It might be have more traditional way of thinking. It might not consider a lot of the context and complexity of your issue, the way that you as a human and someone who's studied these issues and really know them and have talked to the people who are dealing with the problem directly could understand. So try not to rely too heavily on it to be that decision maker and strategic thinker. We still definitely need those people there at the nonprofit to be leading those efforts.
So reading between the lines, it sounds like great for research, great for brainstorming, great for maybe validating certain elements or coming up with new ideas, but actual content creation, it sounds like don't do it. Like at this point, because you want to be genuine, because you want to make real connections, at least today, don't use AI yet.
I would say you can definitely use it for content creation, but you need really strong parameters and you need to be able to instruct it specifically. So again, more with that brainstorming. So like what you get out of it, I think could just help you fill in those gaps of you have an idea for a post, you have, XYZ of research done. How do you actually construct it? So then I think that's where AI can help get things out the door that maybe would just be sitting on a folder on your desktop somewhere. But yeah, having that human review and the human decision maker, the human who understands the strategy and the complexity is essential. So I would not recommend it if you don't have the capacity to review before it goes out.
So going back to the superhero theme of this podcast, if you had a superpower to change something in the social media world, what would it be?
Wow. I need to think about this.
Take your time.
There's too many.
You get to pick one.
I would say, just a way to filter out the haters. And this is going to get a lot of gray and probably a lot of pushback. But we see a lot with the number of clients we work with who are in the online sexual exploitation of children space, seeing a lot of things that are left up on the internet and fueled by social media that are not being taken down because of, freedom of speech or the company's policies. They don't want to make a bold statement and take these things down. So I would say if I could wave a magic wand, there would be a perfect solution to make sure that content never gets posted and the people who are spreading it and, allowing it to go viral would not even have that chance for it to get out there and get the traction that it is right now.
Yeah, bad actors are not good for us. That's a great superpower. So, Brynne, this has been awesome. Thank you so much. A lot of great information. For people who would like to follow up with more questions or get in touch with you, learn more about your organization, how can they get in touch with you?
Well, I'd love to connect with you on LinkedIn, Brynne Krispin. And then you can also go to our website. That's causefocus.com. And that's focus with a K.
Awesome. Brynne, thank you so much for joining me today. And thank you so much for doing what you do.
Thank you so much, Alex. It was great to be here.
All right, that's it for today. I'm Alexander Lapa, and I hope you join me again in the next Agents of Nonprofit.